Hello Copic fans, Michelle Houghton here with Copic in the Craft Room. I had a specific request for a second Sheri Baldi image, So we're going to tackle this one today. I will put in the bottom or underneath the video what image number this is. The request was for darker skin tones, so I'm going to stay within a small natural blending group as best I can for the hair and the skin. And that's what we're going to focus on today. For the skin, I have E33, E35, and E37. For the hair, I'm going to work up through a longer series in the 40s, 43, 44, 47, 49. And then I'm going to add a C9 to kind of punch that through to more of a deep brown black hair color. And I'm pretty sure I did this wrong on my last Sheri Baldi issue. What I'm seeing now, especially on this one, is it looks like the whites of her eyes are not enclosed. So we're gonna give that a try this time. It shrinks that skin area down, but because we're focusing in on just skin and hair, we'll give that a try. So I'm gonna get going. Hopefully I won't have to fast forward very much, but no matter what, I will make sure you know what is going on, talking you through it. So on the skin, I am starting with that E33. And I am working around the whites of her eyes. I realized after I did the first Sheri Baldi image that I probably did it incorrectly, and there looks like there's a lower lash line, and so probably a whites of her eyes that are not completely closed in. So this time I'm trying it, leaving that area open and white, but I'm getting that nice smooth coverage with my E33. There's a lot of color combinations that you can use for darker skin, but I am keeping this one extremely simple, so I'm keeping it in a 3-color natural blending group. So E35 is next, and I'm going to come in with my shading. My light source is going to come in from that right-hand side, so I'm bringing the shadows in from the left. It's going to go particularly around that eye, upper and lower. I am going to bring some shadows in from the right as well, because we know she has a round face that curves back in both directions. It'll also go along the left-hand side of her nose, even though we don't see it all, and the bottom edges of her hands. That finger out on the hand that goes to our right is her left hand, but it goes to our right side is very skinny. So you may not do a whole lot with that other than color it in. I'm going back still again with the E35 to reinforce those shadows. E37 is next, and I'm going into the same areas, but I'm doing in lesser amounts. I've got it in those key spots right against the left edge of her nose, right above and below the left eye, and along the cheek of the left side. Also around the eye on the right side, upper and lower, just doesn't go quite as far. Reinforcing those areas, I'm going to hit her the left side of her neck, the underside of both hands. Then I'm going to go back in and do a little blending. And I figured because these colors are so close together, I might be able to do that just with my E33, my lightest color. So as you can see, I'm moving along. It's blending pretty well, doing some small circles and flicks to pull that color. And for the most part, it's getting smooth where I want it to, where it's smoothing out together. I've got one area though that I still feel like ends up not quite as smooth as I want it, and that is the right hand side of her face. So I am going back in with a little bit of E35 now, that mid-tone, smoothing those two colors together a little bit better, easing that darkest color into the light, and then once again going back with my E33 and smoothing that out one more time. I just really want this to be a nice, even, smooth skin tone. So next I'm going to add just a touch of color. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I used quite a bit of ink on this little tiny face, and so I did have some bleeding into the eyes, and so I am pushing that back in. I'm still using the colorless blender even though I've skipped off the screen. So I'm skipping down. Now I'm going to have to hit that a couple times, so I'll come back to that. Now I'm adding a touch of color to her lips with E04, which is a great base for darker lips. And then R59 just for color. I'm literally putting a couple dots of color on there, and I just leave it. So then I'm going in with her eyes. YR24 is the base color that I'm using. It's just going to give her a really golden brown. And then E99. I'm just doing that at the top edges of her irises, so the part that's nearest the top eyelid, and then blending that a little bit with YR24. I'm going to come back and hit the whites of her eyes again with the colorless blender. This is still pushing that skin tone back onto the skin area and out of the whites of her eyes. I'll have to repeat that process as it dries and moves a couple times. E44 is where I'm starting for her hair. And notice on this one I'm doing a warm, obviously dark hair color, but I am going to leave some white showing. So I'm working from the crown of her head and from her part outward, and I'm flicking and trying to follow the lines the artist has given me so that I can show the growth of her hair and show the texture of her hair. And then coming from the bottom back up, so I'm flicking from the ponytail tie up, from the edges of her neck up, and then I'm going to hit the bottom of her ponytail as well, where it kind of flicks out, and kind of fill that in. Got some areas right around that teeny tiny neck. E47 is next. I do like the E40s for hair. It leans toward almost a dark brown black hair color, and so this is one with darker skin tones that I actually like quite a bit. So same pattern that I just did with my lightest color, or my lighter color, but now I'm using it less. I do fewer flicks, spread them out. I'm getting way up on the tip of my brush nib so they get a little bit thinner as well. Those flicks are getting thinner. We can see more individual strands. Making sure to get darker around the neck. I missed one little spot, but I'll hit it with my darkest color. E49 is next. This is going to be one of my darkest, so I'm real cautious about this. You're going to notice those strands get even thinner, and I use even fewer flicks. I'm still leaving that white. I'm focusing in around her face, where the hair is going to end up darkest, and right against her neck, and right up against that hair tie. Remember, always with hair, you can keep turning that paper so it's in a direction that your hand can move well. Now I'm adding a C9 in very, very limited, because I really do want this hair to look almost black. The C9 is going to cool it down primarily. It's a little bit darker, or about the same value as that E49, but it really cools it. E43 is actually a lighter color, and I'm going to come back in and flick from my mid and dark tones onto that white area. I'm using a broad stroke, so it's kind of more on the side of my brush. The white's not going to disappear, but it's going to soften the flicks and really ease up on that highlight. One more time with my colorless blender, because you can see as that area gets wet, it kind of starts bleeding back in. So I'm going to hit that area, the little highlights on her eyes, and I might have to do that 2 or 3 more times, but I'm just pushing it back onto the skin. One Sheri Baldi image. Skin and hair, obviously considerably darker combination than what we do. Darker skin and darker hair is harder. It is more difficult. So not only have we stepped away from a truly simple image, but now we've stepped away from a truly simple combination. Not only, I appreciate that I'm still using some natural blending groups. I'm working with the E40s on the hair. I'm working with the E30s on the skin. And both are beautiful combinations, which I do really, really like using, but they, especially to get into these smaller detailed images, it is particularly difficult. So like anything else, it's an issue of practice and repetition. You could see probably, or I know you saw, and I talked about, I did have quite a bit of issue with the bleeding, trying to get those layers built up of ink to get those darker skin tones. Then I had issues with bleeding of the ink into the whites of the eye. So I would come back. I've come back 2 or 3 times already with my colorless blender. I would probably need to come back, let it dry, come back again, let it dry, come back again, to get into some of those really tiny areas right around the whites of her eyes. And I could also come back, especially with just the highlight, and add just that touch of Copic opaque white if I needed to. But I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. Skin and hair, we'll come back on another day and do the rest of her. Thanks for joining me today. Have a happy, colorful week.